this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? I'm Bud Elliott, and that's Alec Busse of Cyclone Alert, our 24/7 sports Iowa State site. Nobody does it better. This is summer school. First one of the year, or at least first one recording. I don't know what the release schedule is going to be at. Alec, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on, Bud. Always fun to hop on and talk about the Cyclones. And obviously, last year I previewed a really good team. We'll see if this year's team is expected to be as good.
I was going to 11 wins. That's a hell of a bounce back for Matt Campbell. Not that he needed like a bounce back, but I mean, that's kind of like a step up. What's the vibe there?
Yeah, they're coming off the best season in school history. It's the first time Iowa State had ever won more than 9 games in a regular season or just season overall. They got their 10th regular season win against K-State in the last week of the year. They obviously lost to Arizona State in frustrating fashion in the Big 12 title, but then they were able to beat Miami in the Pop-Tarts Bowl in what was a really fun game. So that was a nice bow on top of a really successful season. And now you're entering 2025 with a lot of good vibes. You return Rocco Becht, you return some key players at other positions on offense and defense. And then you had some exciting transfer prospects as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
I think a lot of people realize what Beck is, but I want to ask you, what can Rocco become?
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to phrase a question. I think what he's shown in his 2 years at Iowa State is someone who's really effective at managing a game. In that term, game manager, I feel like it's turned from a negative connotation with quarterbacks to an overwhelmingly positive one, because if you're not making mistakes, that's a really good thing for most quarterbacks. I think Rocco can take a step forward, and especially in his ability to kind of throw the ball downfield and with his accuracy. It's really interesting that if you look at his numbers from his first year starting to last year, which was his second year under center, his completion percentage actually sunk. And now that he had a second and third round wide receiver selection in Jaden Higgins, going in the second round to the Texans, and Jalen Noel in the third round to the Texans, that's kind of an interesting thing to evaluate, especially when they had two successful tight ends and Ben Bramer and Gabe Burkle. But I think you want to see that take a step forward. And if that takes a step forward, I think you're looking at one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, up there in the conversation with Avery Johnson at K-State. I think Sam Levitt at Arizona State belongs in that conversation. And then certainly some of the guys down in Texas, Josh Hoover, Sawyer Robertson, maybe even Baron Morton down there at Texas Tech.
So last year, if I recall, didn't they have a new play caller as well? He wanted to push the ball down the field. I wonder, that with Noel and Higgins, obviously, how much of the lower completion percentage do you think was like, we're going deeper and those are going to be completed? I mean, obviously, like the EPA is higher if you're hitting them, but still, you're not hitting them at the same rate you would hit, screen balls.
Yeah, that's a really good question. They did go deep a little bit more often. I think ultimately, though, you still want a completion percentage over 60, right? That's kind of like our threshold of okay, that's a fine to good year. You get to 65, 67% starts to really pop off the page. You get to 70%. It's okay, wow, this guy's really, really good. I do think that you want to kind of see that take a rise back up. And especially now that, you're bringing in 2 transfer receivers and Chase Sewell from Eastern Carolina. And then you're also bringing in Xavier Townsend from UCF. And then the 2 tight end names that I mentioned, Burkle and Bramer, they both return as reliable pass catchers. And they should both be healthy after Bramer missed, I think, roughly the last month of last season with a lower body injury. I think he has multiple pass catchers this year, which should help that completion percentage rise. And I still expect Mauser to kind of want to go deep. That's their offensive coordinator, Taylor Mauser. He's been with Iowa State since Matt Campbell got to Ames. And it's now 10 years that he's been at Iowa State, which is kind of hard to believe, I know, for a lot of Iowa State fans and maybe even Coach Campbell himself. But yeah, I think all things considered, it is an offense that probably will continue to throw the ball downfield because they have capable pass catchers downfield. And Rocco has shown throughout his career an ability to complete passes downfield.
Got to ask this question for all our college fantasy fans. I know Cover 3's kind of fantasy audience grew in the offseason. Is there a back who we think is going to get the vast majority of the carries this year, or a receiver who you think will get kind of the majority of the targets?
Yeah, if you're looking from a fantasy perspective, Carson Hansen has got to be your guy at running back if you're looking for an Iowa State type of selection. I think he had 12 or 13 rushing touchdowns a year ago. Maybe isn't somebody who's going to rush for 1,000 yards. He hasn't done that to this point in his career. I don't know if he even topped 500 or 600 yards last year for Iowa State. Sama is going to get more of the home run hitting runs, but I think Hansen will give you more of the consistent production at running back than Sama. And I think it's kind of funny. Sama's probably the better known name nationally because everyone remembers the way he played against Kansas State at the end of the 2023 season in the snow. But I do think Carson Hansen is a little bit more productive and reliable on a week-to-week basis. And then at receiver, I mentioned Xavier Townsend. He's a transfer coming in from UCF, a player that Iowa State had connections to out of high school. He was committed to the Cyclones before flipping to UCF and then obviously transferred to them prior to this season. I think they're going to be really creative in the way that they get him the football. Someone that can certainly take handoffs. We saw that in his career at UCF. I also think he'll be a reliable pass catcher on short, intermediate type passes. And then he has the speed and route running ability to get open over the top, which is also exciting. I think Sowell, the transfer from East Carolina, that was a really big transfer portal recruiting win for them. They got him over Florida and numerous other schools. Someone who was kind of like the Deion Sanders cast-offs after Coach Prime got hired in Boulder. But he's kind of resurfaced now in the Big 12, Sol has, and I think he's a good addition for them as well. And I think the two tight ends, Burkle and Bramer, are both worthy of evaluating, I guess, as pass-catching targets if you're looking for a tight end as well.
Offensive line last year, I mean, good enough to win 11 games, but maybe not winning 11 games because of the offensive line, but it didn't necessarily always stand in the way of getting to 11. What's your confidence level in this group this year?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's a group that does raise some concerns. The coaching staff has spoke positively of it in terms of the depth, the strides that they've taken in terms of their physicality since Ryan Clanton has taken over at Iowa State. This will be his third year with the program. I think that is something that at least listening should raise the confidence of Iowa State fans, but you also kind of want to see it from a play perspective on a Saturday. I think there's a lot of moving parts up front right now for the offensive line. I think James Neal could start at left tackle again. That's a position that he started at in 2023. He's a really athletic kid, but he struggled at times in 2023. I think Dylan Barrett is like the one guy who seems to be locked into his position right now at left guard. He battled some injuries last year, got hurt in the win at West Virginia, lower body injury. They're really high on him. He's really excited to be back. They added his brother, Austin Barrett, a transfer from Wisconsin. I think he's a little bit more of a developmental tackle for them right now, but just kind of an interesting storyline with the two brothers. Center is interesting. I think that Brendan Black, who has started the last 2 years at right guard for them, started as a true freshman. He can move to center, which is kind of interesting, right? Because like that's a position where you want to have a lot of continuity. But if you move him there, you have a lot of experience, which I think is valuable. If they move him to center, I think that puts someone like Dalen Hazer in position to start. He's been a rotational guy for them the last couple of years. And then Tyler Miller, he's a 6-year tackle. He started the last 2 years for Iowa State on the right side. I think he will stay at right tackle, but they have worked him more at left tackle throughout the spring. I imagine he'll continue to do that in the summer. That there's just a lot of moving parts there on the offensive line. I think that's always stressful to kind of listen to and observe as a fan, right? Because you like to think of continuity up front. And when you return, 4 starters, like they kind of do if you factor in Neal, Jim Boniface, who started at center in 2023. Obviously, Brendan Black, like I said, Dylan Barrett and Tyler Miller, like they return guys with starting experience, but maybe not necessarily so much together.
Let's hit a break here. On the flip side, we'll talk a little defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, guys, welcome back here into summer school. I'm talking Iowa State with my man, Alec Busse. All right, so let's get into this. Defensively, last year, the secondary really, really good for this team. Limiting explosive plays, generating takeaways, kind of the whole bag. What's your assessment of this group going into this year?
Yeah, the secondary is going to lose some key players. Malik Verdon didn't end up getting drafted, but he's someone who declared early for Iowa State, and he was successful in his career with the Cyclones, kind of playing in that strong safety type of role, star type of role for Iowa State. So his departure is significant. I don't think it's maybe the headline departure, though, in the safety position. I would probably say it's Bo Frailer. He kind of plays that middle safety role where he kind of is in the box and is coming up to make tackles, defend against the run at a high level. Replacing him will be a challenge. He was a multi-year captain. One of the best leaders that Matt Campbell has ever had in his program is something that he says a lot. So that'll be challenging for Iowa State to replace. And then at corner, Iowa State does lose a couple of playmakers as well. Darian Porter, a day 2 selection in the NFL draft, elite athlete. He also departs. And then Miles Purchase, a multi-year contributor, also leaves the cornerback room. But they do return Jontez Williams, which I think is valuable for them. He led the team in interceptions a year ago. And then at safety, Jeremiah Cooper returns. He'll play the free role for Iowa State. Marcus Neal, a former 4-star prospect, he really impressed me in his freshman season. He was awesome in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Frailer got hurt in that game early in the first quarter, and so that provided Neal a lot of opportunity to play. And he was really good, especially in the second half when Cam Ward wasn't playing for the Hurricanes, because he was obviously awesome in the first half of that game. I'm high on Neal. Then there's some other guys in the secondary that I think will get snaps, like Jameson Patton, Tashawn James. But right now, I think you're going to see Marcus Neal step in for Bo Frailer. Jeremiah Cooper will maintain a starting spot. And I think you'll see Jameson Patton step in for Malik Vernon.
Obviously, if this defense is going to avoid not a huge drop off, but some kind of fall off, the front seven is going to have to probably step up and pick some of the slack from the departed guys in the secondary. Although it is pretty encouraging to hear you like some of these dudes. This is good for my notes. If the front seven steps up, who's kind of the catalyst for that step up?
It'll be interior defensive lineman Dominique Orange. He was, in my opinion, the biggest or second biggest offseason acquisition. I guess that's a word we're using in college football now, behind Rocco Becht. Orange is probably going to play between 60 and 70% of the snaps on the interior of Iowa State's defensive line. And that says a lot, right? Like, interior defensive linemen don't typically play that many snaps. Part of the reason he's going to play that many snaps is because he's being asked to. On the depth perspective, proven player perspective on the interior, Orange is the most proven guy for Iowa State, but he's also the most productive. Really good athlete. He could have transferred to numerous Big Ten or SEC schools had he desired to do that. He also could have declared for the NFL draft and probably been selected on day 2 or day 3, probably day 3. So he's a really big returner for them on the interior of the defensive line. They added a few transfers. Yale transfer Tamatoa McDonough. He'll get to campus in the summer after he finishes his degree in the Ivy League. He's the transfer defensive lineman that I'm the highest on, was really productive for the Bulldogs in the Ivy League a year ago. And then they also added Vontroy Malone, a transfer from Tulsa, and Cannon Butler, a transfer from Northern Iowa, on the defensive end positions. And then at linebacker, they're going to try and be more healthy, which should be really easy to do because they were
so banged up.
They were an emergency room, I guess, with all the injuries they had at linebacker a year ago. Caleb Bacon should be back healthy. Carson Willich should be back healthy from an ACL. Will McLaughlin played the last couple of games of the season after missing a majority of the year with a back injury. He'll be back in the lineup. And then, freshman Kilberzina was really good last year, and physically, like, he looks awesome. I think he'll be healthy and be able to produce for Iowa State more as a sophomore. And then Bo Goodwin, someone else that they're high on. And maybe exceeded expectations for them a year ago, along with redshirt freshman Mason Miller. Didn't play as a freshman, but someone that they're high on long-term.
So this team, actually, let me circle back to the Dom Orange, because the fact that he's playing 60 to 70% of snaps is pretty amazing for a guy that size. Like, they have to be, since you said it's their second biggest acquisition or retention of the offseason, I'm assuming they paid up big to keep him. And also, they got to be really happy with where he is fitness level, right? I mean, he looks huge, but that's pretty impressive to play that many snaps at that size.
Yeah, and they're going to challenge him to play that many snaps. I think he was closer to 40 to 50% of the snaps last year. So that just puts into perspective how many more snaps he's going to be asked to play here in his senior season with Iowa State. And he needs to be productive in those. I think back to last year, over the last month of the season, he was awesome. He was incredibly good against Cincinnati. I think that's the best game he's played. I thought he was also really good against Kansas State. He didn't play the greatest against Arizona State, but then again, no one on Iowa State's defense really played the greatest against the Sun Devils. I mean, Cam Scadaboo had, a Heisman-worthy performance. I think that game put him on a lot of people's Heisman ballots. I think Orange should be their best player on defense. He's a really good athlete. He's really quick. He has the rare combination, right, of size and quick feet and athleticism that very few defensive linemen have, and why that those guys are so craved and valued across the country. So I think Orange needs to be their best player on the defense, and I think he will be, because this program has a long, strong history of player development at a high level, and I think he's someone who is the latest example of that.
If you're setting expectations for this team this year, where do you set them?
Last year when I came on with you, I think I mentioned that I thought that it had a Big 12 championship type of ceiling. I know they didn't win the game, but they got there. So I don't feel like I was too far off.
No,
So
you kind of nailed it.
I'm going to give myself a little bit of a pat on the back. From an on-paper perspective, when I look at this roster, I'm not nearly as high on it as I was a year ago. I think it's a team that wins like 7 to 9 games, depending on how a few of those wonky Big 12 close games go. I also think it's worth pointing out that if you look at their 2024 Big 12 schedule, I believe they only played 3 teams that finished with a winning record in conference play. I know Kansas State was one. I think Baylor was another one that they also played and beat. And I'm trying to think about the third team in the regular season that they may have beat as well. I don't think Kansas finished with one, but I think it was just 3 teams with a winning record last year in Big 12 play that they played in their league schedule. This year, I think their conference schedule is more difficult. Obviously, they get the college football spotlight in week 0 against K-State and Farmageddon. They also get to play BYU and Arizona State. Now, both of those games are in Ames, so that's favorable for Iowa State. They will have to go to TCU, and I think a lot of people forget that team won 9 games a year ago. So I do think it's a team that probably wins between 7 and 9 games, which frankly, like that's been most years under Matt Campbell. Like that's kind of where the program has steadied over the last 8 years of his tenure.
If you look at this schedule, I think the early start to this thing is really pretty important, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get Iowa with a new quarterback. Arizona brings back a good bit, but I mean, the back half of the schedule, if Oklahoma State does bounce back, is really tough, as you mentioned, because that's a lot of experienced quarterbacks you have to play. But you're going to play Leavitt, Hoover, Kansas as well. He's back. BYU should be fairly improved. I could see them be on the upper end of your range. They've got to probably win that opener in Dublin, and then really start hot through early October.
Yeah, and I think what's also interesting about their schedule is their 4th game. They go on the road to play at Arkansas State. Obviously, that's a G5 Sun Belt program. I believe they're in the Sun Belt.
Is that a 2-for-1?
No, it's actually just a 1-for-1 home and home. Iowa State does that with G5 schools as a way to kind of save money. They did it in 2023. They played at Ohio, and they famously lost to Curtis Rourke and the Bobcats. And I'm a big proponent of Big 12 schools have got to stop doing this. ACC schools do it a little bit, not as much as Big 12 schools, but I think you really risk being a Big 12 school or an ACC school, SEC, Big 10 school. If you do this, you are that school's biggest game, no matter what. They care more about beating you that year than they do their conference rival, because beating their conference rival isn't really going to do much for them in terms of national headlines. But if they beat you, that will generate a lot of headlines, especially if Iowa State is kind of hovering around the top 25. And we know how successful they've been over the last few years. So that's a really key game, in my opinion. And then I think the Cyhawk game is really important for Iowa State as well. Always is against Iowa. But you have a chance to win back-to-back games against them. You have a chance for Matt Campbell to get his first win against Iowa in Ames. And this is going to be his 4th or 5th opportunity to do that. So that's obviously an opportunity that Iowa State would love to win. And, Iowa has to replace a ton. You'll talk to David Eichel, I'm sure, for the same series. And
today, actually.
Yeah. You'll learn they're going to have to replace a lot on each side of the ball, especially defense. So that's a key game for Iowa State. And I think you mentioned it really well there, Bud, with the opener against K-State in Dublin. That is going to be a really key game for each team, because I think if you lose, everyone always gets down when you lose your first game of the year. Can't go undefeated anymore. This feels so much worse. But then on top of it, if it's a rivalry game and it's a conference game, that's really tough for just kind of the vibes of everything to kind of overcome. So I do agree with you. I think the beginning of the schedule is very important because the back half of it is really challenging.
Alec, really enjoyed it, man. Anything that you're I can't believe Bud didn't ask me about?
No, I think you kind of hit it. I think it should be another postseason berth for Iowa State. And I think one thing that we learned about the Big 12 last year is that parity is an asset for the Big 12 in terms of entertainment aspects. And I wouldn't be shocked if you see team 14 or 15 in the preseason poll be in the race to go to Arlington and play for the Big 12 title again next year, because every team has pretty equal talent level, and it's become really challenging to kind of separate the 16 schools.
Man, everybody needs to go check out Cyclone Alert, especially the Iowa State listeners. You guys do a great job over there. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.